I want to start today with a bit of a proposition for you listening right now.
Oh, proposition right out of the gate.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine I'm offering you a job.
Okay.
It comes with a uniform, a fair bit of authority, but there is some fine print.
There's always fine print.
Right. But this fine print is intense. First, you are legally considered to be always on duty.
Always.
Always. I don't mean you're on call. I mean legally, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you are working.
Wow.
Second, you cannot resign. Not really. You need permission to quit.
Wait, you can't quit?
Nope. And third, and I think this is the part that really blew my mind when I read it, if the neighborhood you patrol gets a little too rowdy, the actual neighbors might have to pay your salary directly out of their own pockets.
That sounds like a dystopian sci-fi novel. Or, maybe a very strict military deployment in a hostile zone.
It really does.
Yeah.
But what if I told you this isn't fiction? We are talking about the operating system for one of the largest organizations in the world. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the Police Act, 1861.
Which is just a massive topic. I mean, this is a piece of legislation that is over 160 years old, yet it laid the entire foundation for the police force in India.
Yeah.
And I think your phrase, operating system, is the perfect metaphor here. We aren't looking at the flashy user interface today. We aren't looking at the uniforms, the sirens, or, true crime stories.
Right. None of that.
We are looking at the source code.
Exactly. We are looking at the machinery itself. And to understand the machine, we really have to look at when it was built, 1861. That date is crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial. You have to remember the context of that specific year. This is just 4 years after the uprising of 1857.
What the British colonial government called the Mutiny.
Precisely. The colonial government was shaken to its absolute core by that. They realized they needed a force that wasn't just about solving burglaries or petty theft. They needed a force designed to maintain absolute control over a vast, potentially rebellious population.
So this document wasn't necessarily written to protect and serve in the modern sense that we think of today.
No, not at all. It was written to secure the state. If you look at the preamble of the act, it uses very specific, very telling language.
What does it say?
It says it is expedient to reorganize the police to make it a, quote, more efficient instrument.
Instrument?
Yes, that word tells you everything you need to know. An instrument doesn't think for itself, it acts. It is used by someone else.
So let's figure out who is holding the handle of this instrument. Because when I started reading this source material, I just assumed the police are their own independent entity.
Sure, that's the common assumption.
You have the chief of police, they make the internal decisions, they set the policy. But Section 3 really throws cold water on that idea immediately.
It absolutely does. Section 3 is where the iron hierarchy of this whole system is cemented. It says, and I'll quote it, "The superintendents of the police throughout a general police district shall vest in and shall be exercised by the state government."
Wait, so not the police chief, the actual state government.
The political government, yes. The section explicitly says that no person, officer, or court is empowered to supersede or control any police functionary unless the act specifically says so.
That is a huge distinction.
It is. The ultimate boss isn't a seasoned cop who rose through the ranks. It's the state itself.
Okay, so the state holds the leash.
Yeah.
But there has to be someone running the day-to-day operations, right? The politicians aren't managing patrol routes.
Right. And that brings us to Section 4 and Section 5. The daily administration is vested in an officer called the Inspector General of Police, or the IG.
The IG.
And the Act gives the IG the full powers of a magistrate.
Full powers of a magistrate. That sounds incredibly impressive.
It is a massive amount of power. But, again, the Act immediately adds a caveat. He exercises those powers, quote, subject to such limitations as may from time to time be imposed by the state government.
Wow.
So even the highest-ranking officer in the entire system is kept on a very tight leash by the political authority.
It's a chain of command that feels very well ironclad. And speaking of ironclad, I want to zoom in on what it feels like to actually be a regular officer caught inside this system.
Let's do it.
Because Section 8 introduces something that feels almost like a magical object to me. The certificate.
Ah, yes, the certificate.
It's not just an ID badge, is it? When I was reading, it felt like something much heavier.
No, it's much more than an ID. Section 8 says that every police officer receives a certificate upon appointment. And by virtue of simply holding this physical piece of paper, They are vested with the powers, functions, and privileges of a police officer.
It's literally a totem. You hold the paper, you have the power.
Exactly. It's the physical embodiment of state authority.
But what happens if you lose the job? Or, say, you get fired?
That's where the system gets incredibly strict. The Act says the certificate, quote, shall be forthwith surrendered. You have to give it back immediately.
Forthwith.
Yes. And Section 28 tells us exactly what happens if you decide you don't want to give it back.
I saw that part. It lists the penalties. It says if you refuse to give back the certificate, or your clothing, or your, I really love this word, accoutrement.
Accoutrement, it's such a great 19th century word. It covers everything. The belt, the baton, the boots.
Right. If you don't give those accoutrements back, you can be fined 200 rupees.
Which, we have to remember, in 1861 was an absolute fortune.
Yeah, I imagine.
It was a completely life-ruining amount of money for a standard constable.
And what if you just can't pay it? You're a fired cop, you don't have 200 rupees.
Then you face imprisonment for up to 6 months.
6 months in jail.
Just for keeping your uniform boots.
Yeah.
This establishes a really vital psychological dynamic for the entire force. Being a police officer under this act isn't a fundamental right, it's a temporary status.
Inferred by the state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The state lends you the power, and they can strip it from you in a heartbeat. You do not own the role.
That idea that you don't own the role, but rather the role owns you, that really hit me when I got to Section 22. We joked in the intro about being always on duty, but I really want to read the actual text here because it's wild.
Go ahead. It's a defining sentence for the whole operating system.
Section 22 says, every police officer shall, for all purposes in this act, be considered to be always on duty.
Always on duty. No exceptions.
And it continues, saying, and may at any time be employed as a police officer in any part of the general police district. So put yourself in their shoes. Let's say you just finished a grueling 12-hour shift. You're finally home, you're sitting down, you're eating dinner with your family. Can you legally look at your supervisor and say, sorry, I'm off the clock?
Under the 1861 Act, absolutely not. The very concept of being off the clock does not legally exist for you. You are, for all intents and purposes, property of the department.
That's so heavy.
It was designed specifically to create a force that was a total institution. They didn't want civil servants who demanded a healthy work-life balance. They wanted a standing army that lived in the barracks and was ready to deploy instantly, anywhere, at any time.
And that level of control, it extends deep into your personal life, too. Look at Section 10. It says you can't even have a side hustle.
Correct. You cannot engage in any employment or office whatever other than your duties unless the Inspector General specifically gives you written permission.
You are completely, wholly dependent on the police salary.
Which makes the next part even scarier when you realize you can't just quit if you don't like the job anymore.
Exactly. I mean, in a normal job, if the working conditions are terrible or your boss is abusive, you put in your 2 weeks' notice and you walk away.
Not in this system. Section 9 clearly states that no police officer is at liberty to resign their office without leave or without giving 2 months' notice.
2 months.
2 entire months.
And what if you just walk away? Or let's say a massive riot breaks out and you decide, you know what, I'm too scared to deal with this, I'm going home.
Section 29 lays out the penalties for what it calls violation of duty.
Yeah, I looked at this list of violations. It is essentially a list of human flaws being criminalized. It penalizes cowardice.
Yes.
It penalizes overstaying your leave. It even penalizes just being careless.
And remember, the punishment for being careless isn't a bad performance review or getting yelled at by your boss. It's up to 3 months pay docked or imprisonment for up to 3 months.
Imagine going to an actual prison because your boss decided you were careless on your shift.
It severely reinforces that military vibe you mentioned earlier. You are conscripted into this state machine, and the machine simply does not tolerate any friction from its parts.
Okay, so the control over the officers is intense. But if you think that's wild, wait until we talk about the control over the citizens.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there is a section in here that I think is easily the most shocking part of the entire act. It's about who actually pays for the police.
You're talking about the quartering of additional police. Section 15.
Section 15. This section completely transforms the police from a public service into a punitive measure.
It really does.
So walk me through this scenario. Let's say I live in a neighborhood and things are getting really tense. Maybe there are political protests. Maybe it's just generally rowdy and chaotic. What happens?
Well, under Section 15, the state government has the power to declare your specific area to be disturbed or dangerous, and they base this on the conduct of the inhabitants.
Okay, so my neighborhood gets a label. We are a disturbed area.
Right. Once you have that official label, the Inspector General can send in an additional police force to restore order in your streets. Now, in a modern context, normally you'd think, okay, the government's sending more cops to help. That's what my taxes are paying for.
Right, that's the basic social contract of living in a state.
Not under this act. Section 15, subsection 3, explicitly says the cost of this extra police force, quote, shall be borne by the inhabitants of such area.
Wait, so because my neighborhood is acting up, I personally get a bill in the mail.
You get a bill. The local magistrate actually sits down, looks at all the inhabitants in the designated area, assesses their financial means, and apportions the cost. The magistrate decides, you owe this much. Your neighbor owes that much.
That is just diabolical. It's a collective fine on an entire community.
It is a collective fine. And think about the brilliant, twisted psychology of that for a second. If I know that you're protesting in the street is going to end up costing me my hard-earned money, what am I going to do?
You're going to stop me. You're going to come out and tell me to shut up and go inside so our neighborhood rates don't go up.
Exactly. It weaponizes the community against itself. It turns neighbors into self-policers. The state doesn't need to put a cop on every corner if the residents are aggressively policing each other just to save their own wallets.
And that goes even deeper than just paying for the extra cops. I was looking at Section 15A regarding compensation.
Yes, 15A deals with actual damages. If there's a riot and property gets damaged, or worse, people are hurt or killed, the magistrate can decide that the inhabitants of that area have to pay compensation directly to the victims.
So again, the community acts as this involuntary insurance policy for the state.
Exactly.
But there was a specific amendment mentioned in our notes for this deep dive. The ERISA amendment to Section 15A. It added a really specific trigger for who becomes liable.
Oh, that is a fantastic detail to bring up. The ERISA amendment says inhabitants can be held liable not just for their own misconduct, but for, quote, failure on their part to render assistance in preventing such loss or damage.
So just standing there and doing nothing is essentially a crime.
Doing nothing will cost you money. If you stand on your porch and just watch the riot happen, you are liable. You are legally obligated by this amendment to step in and stop it.
That is terrifying. It forces you, as a private citizen, to be an active participant in enforcing the state's version of order.
Forces is exactly the right word. And if threatening your money isn't enough to force you, the Act has another tool in its belt. It can literally draft you.
You're talking about Section 17, right? The special police officers.
Yes. So imagine the regular police force is completely overwhelmed. A massive riot is breaking out. They don't have the numbers. An inspector, and mind you, not even a high-ranking IG, just a local inspector, can apply to a magistrate to appoint, quote, residents of the neighborhood to act as special police officers.
So it's just a knock on my door. Congratulations, here's a baton, you're a cop now.
Essentially, yes. And you really don't get a choice in the matter.
I looked at Section 19 regarding this. It says if you refuse to serve as a special officer without a sufficient excuse, you get fined 50 rupees.
Which, again, was a massive punishing fine back then. So the state gives you a choice, pay a fortune that might ruin you, or put on the armband and go face down the angry mob yourself.
It completely blurs the line between the citizen and the state.
Yeah.
When the state is in trouble, it just consumes the citizen to save itself.
That's a really powerful way to put it. It consumes the citizen. And remember, once you are drafted, these special officers are under the exact same strict orders and penalties as the regular lifers.
All right, so we've established that the state controls the officers with an iron fist, and it can financially punish or literally conscript the citizens. But let's shift gears and talk about what they're actually policing out there.
Let's do it.
Because looking at the text, it's not just major crime, it's the environment. It's the literal vibe of the streets.
This is where we get into the heavy regulation of public space, specifically Sections 30 and 30A.
These sections talk about managing assemblies and processions, but there is a very specific mention of music.
Yes. The Act says the police can regulate, quote, the extent to which music may be used in the streets.
It sounds almost trivial to us today, like a neighbor filing a noise complaint.
It does sound trivial now, but you have to put it in the context of India in 1861. And honestly, even today, music is huge in the public sphere. It's religious, it's cultural, it's deeply political. Processions are a primary way communities express themselves.
So the police are essentially the DJs of the district. They decide the playlist.
They decide the volume, the timing, and who gets to play what. Section 30 allows the superintendent to license and regulate the conduct of all assemblies, but Section 30A is where they get their teeth.
What does 30A do?
If a procession violates the specific conditions of its license, say a group plays a drum beat when the license said they had to pass a specific building in silence, the police can order the entire assembly to disperse immediately.
And if they don't disperse over a drumbeat?
It legally becomes an unlawful assembly. Now you're committing a serious crime. You've gone from a religious festival to a full-blown riot in the eyes of the law, all because of a drum beat.
It's like they are controlling the soundtrack of authority. Silence means order. Noise means chaos.
Precisely. They are forcefully curating the soundscape of the colonial city. And speaking of curating the city, we have to talk about the quality of life offenses.
Oh, Section 34. This might be my favorite part of the entire document because it paints such a vivid, chaotic picture of 19th century urban life.
It really does.
It's just this laundry list of things officers can arrest you for without a warrant.
That without a warrant part is the key to understanding this section. It means the officer can take immediate on-the-spot action without checking with a judge.
Let's run through some of these offenses because they are wild. First, slaughtering cattle or cleaning a carcass in the public street.
Right, obviously they wanted to clean up the terrible hygiene of the city streets.
Fair enough. But then we have furious riding.
Furious riding, which the Act defines as riding or driving cattle recklessly or furiously. It's basically the 1861 version of illegal street racing.
Then there's cruelty to animals. Wantonly beating or abusing an animal, which honestly, that one surprised me. It feels very progressive for a law written in 1861.
It does look progressive on the surface, but we really have to ask why it's in there. Was the colonial state deeply concerned about animal rights? Or was it more about preventing these messy public spectacles of violence that upset the visual order of the street?
That's a really sharp point. It's about maintaining a sanitized visual environment, which explains the purely nuisance ones on the list too, like obstructing passengers by leaving your cart in the middle of the road.
Exactly.
Or throwing dirt, literally throwing rubbish or stones into the street. And indecent exposure.
Willfully exposing one's person. The Act also includes neglecting to protect dangerous places, like failing to fence off a well or a tank on your property.
But why are these police matters? Why aren't these just handled by municipal fines or a city planner?
Because the overarching goal was to forcefully sanitize the chaotic colonial street. The British wanted an environment that was predictable, clean, and European in its orderliness. By making throwing dirt an arrestable offense, you give the patrol police the power to constantly intervene in the daily, mundane lives of the common people.
It creates a massive amount of contact points between the police and the public.
Yes, exactly.
And every single one of those contact points is an opportunity for the state to assert its authority. Hey, move that cart. Hey, stop that horse. Pick up that rubbish.
It establishes daily, visible dominance over the physical space of the city.
But here's the massive problem with that. If you give a patrol officer the power to arrest someone on the spot, without a warrant, for furious riding, mistakes are absolutely going to happen.
Oh, without a doubt.
Or outright abuse of power. What if I wasn't riding furiously? What if the officer just didn't like my face? Under this system, can I sue him?
You can certainly try. But the Act has built an absolute fortress around the officer. This is what we call the shield of the law.
I was looking at Section 42, which is titled Limitation of Actions.
Right. So say you want to sue an officer for something they did to you under the guise of this Act. First, you are hit with a strict deadline. You must start the legal action within 3 months of the act being committed.
3 months. In 1861.
It's a blink of an eye. Imagine you've been wrongfully arrested. Maybe you were injured in the process. You have to physically recover, find a lawyer who will take the case, get your funds together to pay them. And, oh, by the way, the Act also says you must give 1 month's written notice before you even officially sue.
So the window to actually get your life together and sue the state is effectively just 2 months.
It's specifically designed to discourage any litigation against the force. But let's say you are incredibly determined. Even if you manage to sue in time, you run straight into Section 43, the plea of warrant.
This is the part of the text that confused me a bit. It talks a lot about a defect of jurisdiction. Can you break that concept down for us?
Sure, it's a bit of legal jargon. Let's use a modern analogy. Imagine your boss at work tells you to go repossess a car. He gives you a formally signed piece of paper authorizing the repossession. You follow orders, you go take the car. Later, it turns out your boss didn't actually have the legal authority to order that repossession. He was operating out of his jurisdiction.
Okay, I follow. So normally, in the real world, I'd be in a lot of trouble for effectively stealing a car.
In the normal legal world, yes. But under Section 43 of this act, the police officer can just hold up their hands and say, I was just following this warrant. As long as the signature on the paper looks genuine and the officer acted in good faith believing it was real, he is completely protected from civil liability.
Even though the warrant itself was fundamentally illegal.
Even though the magistrate who signed it had a defect of jurisdiction. The act explicitly says the officer is entitled to a decree in his favor, quote, notwithstanding any defect of jurisdiction.
So the law essentially cares more about the order being blindly followed than the order actually being legal.
Yes, that is the critical takeaway from the entire document. The system prioritizes the smooth execution of the will of the state over the technical legality of the authority. The officer on the street isn't supposed to be a legal scholar checking the judge's homework.
Right.
He's supposed to be an instrument that merely obeys.
And that brings us perfectly back around to that word from the preamble, instrument. When you step back from all the individual sections and look at this whole picture, it's quite a sight. We have a force that is strictly state-controlled, hierarchically rigid, and legally always on duty.
Yes.
We have a system where neighbors literally pay for their own policing if they step out of line. We have draft conscription for civilians. We have the strict regulation of street music and dirt. And we have an impenetrable legal shield that protects the enforcers even when the orders they follow are bad.
It is a comprehensive, airtight system engineered entirely for maintaining the status quo.
It really changes how you look at the uniform today. It's not just a person doing a civic job. It's the tip of a spear that was forged over 160 years ago.
It truly is. And if I could leave you, the listener, with one final, perhaps provocative thought to mull over, I would point you to Section 23.
We haven't talked much about Section 23. That's the duty section, right? Yeah.
It is. It's simply titled Duties of Police Officers. Now, if I asked you today what the primary duty of a police officer is, what would you say?
I'd probably say to protect and serve, or to prevent crime and keep people safe.
Right. Those are the modern slogans we all know. But look at the actual text of Section 23 in this foundational document. Look at the very first duty listed.
Now, I'm reading it now. It says, it shall be the duty of every police officer promptly to obey and execute all orders and warrants lawfully issued to him by any competent authority.
Promptly to obey. That is duty number one. The collection of intelligence, the prevention of public nuisances, the bringing of criminal offenders to justice. All of those duties come after obedience.
So the primary function of the machine isn't public safety at all, it's obedience.
The primary design of the system is absolute obedience to the state authority. Remember Section 3. And since the officer is always on duty per Section 22, it raises a really profound question for us today. When the rubber meets the road, does this historical structure create a force that is loyal to the law in the abstract sense of justice? Or is it fundamentally designed to be loyal first and foremost to the government of the day?
That is a very heavy question to leave us with. And looking at the massive machinery we just unpacked today, I think the answer is written right there in the code.
The source code usually tells the truth.
This has been a deeply fascinating look into the gears of history. Thank you for walking through this with me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to you listening, next time you see a uniform out on the street, just remember Section 22. They never clock out. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.